Railroads are offering six-figure salaries, signing bonuses, and guaranteed jobs, yet they still can't fill the seats. Why is one of the best-paying blue-collar jobs in America the one nobody wants? The answer starts with what locomotive engineers actually carry, and what carrying it actually costs them. Every day, locomotive engineers move the lifeblood of the American economy. Their trains haul grain from the Midwest, coal from Wyoming, and chemicals from Gulf Coast refineries. Boxcars carry finished cars, electronics, and building materials. Tankers roll with ethanol, fuel, and fertilizer. In a typical year, nearly 70% of all U.S. grain travels by rail. 8 out of every 10 tons of coal burned in power plants arrive behind a locomotive. 3/4 of U.S. ethanol is shipped this way, along with the bulk of industrial chemicals and plastics that factories depend on. The reach of freight rail stretches from the grain elevators of Nebraska to the ports of Los Angeles, from fertilizer plants in Iowa to auto factories in Michigan. When an engineer is missing from the roster, the impact isn't just a late train. A single unfilled engineer slot can set off a chain of delays. Ethanol producers hold product in storage tanks longer, risking spoilage or price drops. Grain elevators fill up, forcing farmers to wait or pay extra storage fees. Fertilizer shipments arrive late, threatening planting schedules for entire regions. Even a short-lived shortage like the week-long crew gap in the Dakotas in early 2025 can ripple out. That incident saw ethanol and grain shipments miss their loading windows, backup rail cars clogging sidings, and complaints filed with federal regulators. The costs add up quickly. Industry analysts estimate that every day of crew shortage tacks on $2 to $3 million in indirect costs, extra storage, demurrage charges, and price spikes for the goods themselves. The Association of American Railroads reported a 5% jump in freight price volatility during periods of reduced crew availability. When trains don't run, factories idle, inventories shrink, and grocery prices climb. The engineer's role sits at the center of this system, largely invisible until something goes wrong. For most people, railroads are background noise, a distant horn, a string of cars at a crossing. But the reality is that the entire supply chain depends on a workforce that is shrinking, aging, and increasingly hard to replace. The engineer is not just a driver, but the last link in a chain that keeps grocery shelves stocked and fuel flowing. The public rarely sees the cost of a missing engineer, but the effects touch every corner of the economy. This is why the shortage matters, not just to railroads, but to anyone who eats, drives, or depends on goods that cross the continent by rail. Six-figure salaries and signing bonuses make for eye-catching headlines. Railroad ads promise stability, benefits, and paychecks that rival those of many professionals. Yet even as Class I railroads raise their offers, with an average base pay of $93,000 and signing bonuses up to $25,000, the hiring boards still show thousands of unfilled engineer slots. The money is real, but the line of applicants is not. Vacancy rates remain stubborn, and internal data from BNSF and Union Pacific display open crew positions month after month, despite the financial incentives. For those outside the industry, the logic seems simple: raise the pay, fill the jobs. But the reality is more complicated. Pay is only the beginning of the story. The job's demands stretch far beyond the numbers on a pay stub. As one veteran engineer put it in a recorded union testimony, "The check is good, but it costs you more than money. I missed half my kids' birthdays, and I can't get those days back." This is not a profession where a high salary guarantees a stable life. The job's true cost is measured in missed milestones, chronic exhaustion, and the constant uncertainty of when the next call will come. Engineers describe a career shaped by unpredictability, where the promise of a steady income is undercut by the reality of always being on call. The public image of a well-paid, secure railroad job fades quickly when set against the lived experience of those who keep the trains moving. High pay may attract attention, but it cannot hold workers in a role that erodes their freedom and time. The shortage persists, not because the compensation is low, but because the personal cost is so high. The next step is to understand what that cost looks like, day after day, for the people behind the controls. On the railroad, the clock never truly stops. Engineers live by a 2-hour notice. At any hour, day or night, the phone can ring. There is no fixed start time, no regular shift, just a standing order to stay ready. A call might come at 2 a.m., instructing an engineer to report to the yard by 4 a.m. The job isn't just about moving freight, it is about being perpetually available, compressing life into a cycle of waiting and sudden action. Seniority shapes the roster, but even veterans find themselves on the so-called extra board, a pool where assignments go to whoever is next up and present. Plans are provisional. A dinner out, a child's ball game, even sleep must be weighed against the possibility of a call. Engineers describe days spent in a kind of suspended animation, unable to commit to anything beyond the next hour. The unpredictability is not a rare event, but a daily reality. The on-call system is a legacy of the industry's relentless schedule. Trains depart around the clock, and freight does not wait for weekends or holidays. Most engineers keep a bag packed by the door and their phone charged at all times. Missing a call can cost them dearly. Attendance policies at companies like BNSF and Union Pacific use a point system. Fail to answer, and points are deducted. Too many missed calls, and a job is on the line. The pressure to remain available is constant and unforgiving. A veteran engineer describes the rhythm as living inside a waiting room that never closes. Even during supposed time off, rest is interrupted by the thought of the next assignment. There is little time to recover and even less to plan ahead. The 2-hour notice is not just a technicality, it defines the boundaries of an engineer's world. Every day, the routine is dictated by the possibility of that phone call, and every night, sleep is shallow, interrupted by the need to be ready at a moment's notice. This system does not just inconvenience, it erases predictability, making it impossible to build routines or guarantee time with loved ones. For those on the extra board, the question is never if the call will come, but when. The only certainty is uncertainty, and over time, the strain accumulates. The next call could be at dawn or in the dead of night, and life must bend to fit the railroad's schedule. A family dinner can fall apart with a single phone call. The engineer's phone, always charged and within reach, is an invisible presence at home. Its ring can erase plans in an instant. Birthdays, holidays, and anniversaries become tentative. A child's school play is penciled in, but the tickets sit unused if the railroad calls. Spouses learn to keep celebrations flexible, baking cakes that sometimes go uneaten, wrapping gifts that might not be opened together. One BNSF engineer's partner described making backup plans for every holiday, knowing that a sudden 2 a.m. call could mean another empty chair at the table. The 2-hour notice policy shapes not just the engineer's life, but the entire household's rhythm. Medical appointments are often missed or rescheduled. Soccer games and graduations are attended with one eye on the clock, the possibility of a call never far from anyone's mind. Children become used to explaining to friends why their parent is gone again. Spouses take on the role of single parent more often than not, handling bedtime routines, doctor visits, and parent-teacher conferences alone. Some families keep a suitcase packed by the door, not for travel, but so the engineer can leave at a moment's notice. Ordinary days are marked by uncertainty. A family might plan a simple picnic, only for the engineer to vanish mid-morning when the roster turns over. Even when home, engineers are often too tired to be present. Fatigue from long runs and unpredictable hours seeps into every conversation. Stories of missed first steps, lost anniversaries, and canceled vacations echo across union halls and kitchen tables alike. The spouse of a veteran engineer in Nebraska recalled the year her husband missed every major holiday, including Christmas, because of back-to-back runs and no available time off. The cost of the job is measured in absence as much as in dollars. The engineer's commitment to the railroad is shared by everyone in the home, often without their consent. Over time, the strain shapes family routines and relationships. Children learn to lower their expectations. Partners become experts at managing disappointment. The empty seat at dinner is not just a symbol, it is a daily reality, a reminder that the railroad's schedule always comes first. The shortage of engineers is not only a labor problem, it is a domestic one, with consequences that ripple through every household tied to the rails. As family life bends to the demands of the job, the solitude of the cab becomes mirrored by the loneliness at home. A train engineer's world narrows the moment the front door closes behind them. The next stop might be a rail yard 2 states away or a motel off the highway, chosen for its proximity to the tracks rather than comfort. Suitcases become a constant companion, packed for days on the road, sometimes with barely enough time to swap out clean clothes before the next call. The rhythm of the job is set by the railroad, not by sunrise or sunset. Overnight runs are common, with engineers settling into the cab as dusk falls, preparing for a journey measured in hours of darkness and the steady pulse of the engine. Inside the locomotive, the outside world drops away. The cab is a closed space, sealed against weather, but not against fatigue or monotony. The hum of the diesel engine, the static of radio chatter, the distant clang of crossing bells. These are the sounds that fill the night. Conversation is sparse, especially on long stretches where the only company is the dispatcher's voice and the glow of the instrument panel. For some, the cab offers a kind of focus, but for most, the repetition weighs heavy. Each mile blurs into the next, broken only by brief stops at sidings or the rare sight of another train passing in the opposite direction. When the run ends, rest doesn't mean home. Many engineers spend nights in chain motels near the yard, their windows facing parking lots or rows of parked freight cars. Meals come from vending machines or late-night diners. Sleep is shallow, interrupted by the knowledge that another call could come before dawn. Over time, this becomes a way of life, living out of a suitcase, adapting to unfamiliar beds, and measuring rest in short bursts. The isolation is both physical and emotional, with long hours away from family and friends turning the engineer's world into a series of quiet rooms and empty highways. The shortage deepens as more workers decide that the solitude and exhaustion outweigh any promise of a steady paycheck. Precision-scheduled railroading, known in the industry as PSR, was introduced with a simple promise: make freight rail more efficiency by running fewer, longer trains on tighter schedules. The idea took hold in the late 2010s, spreading from CSX to Union Pacific, BNSF, and Norfolk Southern. On paper, PSR looked like a breakthrough. Trains would spend less time waiting in yards, cars would be handled fewer times, and every asset from locomotives to crews would be used to its maximum. But the reality for the people running those trains was far from simple. Under PSR, railroads cut deep. Between 2011 and 2021, the 7 largest freight carriers slashed their total workforce by 28%. Mechanical maintenance shops lost 41% of their staff after 2015. The most visible change came in the cab. Crew sizes fell sharply, and the old model of frequent, shorter trains gave way to fewer, much longer ones. By 2017, the average mainline train on the 2 largest carriers stretched nearly 9,000 feet, over a mile and a half. By 2023, the median train length on Class 1 railroads was 5,300 feet, with some trains now running up to 15,000 feet, more than double what was typical a decade earlier. For engineers, this meant more responsibility with less help. Fewer trains on the schedule meant each run was longer, both in distance and duration. Fewer crew members meant more time spent alone in the cab, managing not just the locomotive, but the logistical demands of a train that could be 2 miles long. If a problem arose, a mechanical failure, a blocked crossing, or an emergency, there were fewer hands to solve it and more pressure to keep the train moving. PSR's cost-cutting logic didn't just mean fewer jobs. It meant that every remaining engineer carried a heavier load. The margin for error shrank. When a crew member called out sick or could not make a run, there were fewer people to fill the gap, so delays rippled through the system faster. On-time performance, once the selling point of the new model, began to slip. Intermodal trains, which move shipping containers between ports and inland hubs, saw their on-time rate fall from 92% to 88%. The system became more fragile, not less, as fewer people were asked to do more with less support. Engineers described the pressure in blunt terms: longer trains, tighter schedules, and no buffer for fatigue or unexpected delays. The changes were not just about numbers, they altered the daily reality of the job. The railroad's pursuit of efficiency, measured in metrics and quarterly reports, translated into a relentless squeeze on the people at the controls. PSR did not create the hardship of the engineer's life, but it made that hardship sharper, more isolating, and harder to escape. The next layer of the story is how these structural changes paved the way for stricter disciplinary systems and even less room for error. A missed call can cost an engineer their job. On the nation's biggest freight railroads, attendance is tracked by points. Each engineer starts with a fixed balance, 30 points at BNSF, the industry's most publicized system. Every missed call, no-show, or unscheduled absence subtracts points, and the penalty rises on days when the railroad is short-staffed. A missed call on a high-impact day can wipe out half an engineer's point balance in a single stroke. Drop to zero, and termination is automatic. There is no room for negotiation, no consideration for why the call was missed. The policy leaves little space for life's unpredictability. Medical emergencies, family obligations, even sudden illness count against the engineer. At Union Pacific, the details are less transparent, but the structure is similar, with points lost for any absence and the threat of discipline or dismissal always looming. The union has called these systems a trap. In official statements and grievance filings, the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen describes the rules as punishing flexibility, demanding workers be available at all hours, yet penalizing them for any disruption, planned or not. After a wave of pushback, BNSF softened some rules in June 2000 to bend their lives around the railroad's needs. Yet any failure to comply, no matter the reason, can trigger discipline or end a career. The union's position is blunt. The railroad's need for flexibility comes at the direct expense of the workers' health and stability. The attendance trap is not just a policy. It is a daily source of anxiety, forcing engineers to weigh every decision against the risk of losing their livelihood. The relentless strain of this system sets the stage for the deeper health consequences that follow. Fatigue is not just a background feature of the engineer's life, it is the job's constant companion. The 2-hour notice system, the unpredictable calls, and the relentless pressure to be available carve deep into the body's natural rhythms. Sleep becomes fragmented, never truly restful, as engineers learn to doze lightly, always half prepared for the phone to ring. Over time, tiredness hardens into something more lasting, chronic fatigue. This is not the simple weariness that fades after a good night's rest. It is a steady erosion of alertness, memory, and reaction time. Veteran engineers describe the sensation as living in a permanent twilight. One retired operator, after 3 decades on the rails, recalled waking from dreams where he was still in the cab, hands gripping the throttle, mind replaying signals and track changes. The line between work and rest blurs until even days off feel haunted by exhaustion. Medical research backs up these stories. The National Academy's 2022 report found that engineers working rotating on-call schedules lose 2 to 3 hours of sleep per day compared to the average adult. That deficit does not simply accumulate, it multiplies, degrading the ability to focus, make decisions, and respond quickly in emergencies. The consequences reach beyond discomfort. Laboratory tests using high-fidelity train simulators show that chronically fatigued engineers perform nearly a quarter worse on brake response tests than their well-rested counterparts. Microsleep episodes, brief, uncontrollable lapses in attention, become more common, especially during overnight runs. The Federal Railroad Administration's own data lists dozens of fatigue-related incidents each year, including near misses and, in some cases, derailments. In 2024 alone, 87 reported rail events cited fatigue as a contributing factor. For a job where a split-second decision can mean the difference between safety and disaster, the margin for error shrinks dangerously. The health costs are not limited to the cab. Peer-reviewed studies link chronic sleep loss to higher risks of cardiovascular disease, depression, and long-term cognitive decline. Engineers report persistent headaches, digestive problems, and a sense of emotional numbness that lingers even on rare vacations. Family members notice the change first. A partner who is always tired, a parent too drained to play or be present. Over years, the personal toll becomes visible in the faces and voices of those who remain on the job. Fatigue is not just a private struggle. It is a safety hazard, a public risk woven into the fabric of the rail system. Every missed hour of sleep increases the odds of an error that can ripple through the supply chain, disrupt communities, and endanger lives. For many, the realization comes too late. The cost of keeping the trains running is measured in lost health, shortened careers, and sometimes irreversible mistakes. The question is no longer just who wants to drive locomotives, but who can withstand the toll long enough to even finish the training pipeline. Becoming a locomotive engineer isn't as simple as signing an offer letter and picking up a set of keys. The path from new hire to certified engineer is a gauntlet designed to ensure safety, but also to test who can withstand the relentless pace. Training begins in the classroom, where recruits spend 40 hours learning the rules, signals, braking systems, emergency procedures, and the dense language of railroad operations. For many, this is the first taste of just how much is at stake every time a train moves. After the textbooks close, the next gate is the simulator. Here, trainees face high-fidelity replicas of real cabs, complete with flashing signals, shifting tracks, and sudden emergencies. The simulator doesn't just test technical knowledge, it probes how recruits react under stress, how quickly they spot danger, and whether they can keep calm when alarms sound. Mistakes here don't cost lives, but they do send some trainees back to the beginning or out of the program entirely. The survivors of the classroom and simulator move on to the heart of the process, on-the-job training. Paired with senior engineers, trainees climb into real locomotives, running freight across hundreds of miles. This apprenticeship lasts 12 weeks or more, with every shift an exam. The hours are unpredictable, the runs are long, and the lessons are unforgiving. Trainees must master not just the controls, but the rhythm of life on call, the fatigue, and the constant pressure to perform. Attrition is high. Industry data shows that nearly half of all new hires never make it to full qualification. Some struggle with the technical demands or fail simulator tests, but many leave because the lifestyle becomes impossible to sustain. One trainee, who left after his third week on the road, described the moment he realized he hadn't seen his family awake in days. The pay was good, but the cost was too high. His story is echoed by dozens of others who enter the pipeline only to find the reality far removed from the promise. The qualification process is not just a filter for skill, it is a filter for endurance. Each stage weeds out those who can't adapt to the schedule, the stress, or the isolation. The result is a bottleneck. Plenty of applicants at the start, but far fewer at the finish. For the railroads, this means that recruitment drives do little to solve the shortage if the pipeline itself is so narrow. For the industry, the bottleneck is already tightening as retirements loom and fewer trainees make it through. Behind the scenes, demographic pressure is building, and the system's ability to replenish its ranks is under strain. The workforce behind America's freight trains is graying fast. Industry surveys put the median age of rail employees in the low 50s, a figure that climbs higher among engineers. The faces in union halls and crew lounges tell the story. Men and women who started their careers when trains ran shorter, rosters were full, and the job came with a sense of permanence. Now every month brings a new round of retirements. The Institute of Mechanical Engineers projects that around 15,000 engineers will leave the rails by 2025, with as many as 12,000 new hires needed each year just to keep pace. But the pipeline is not keeping up. For every new recruit who survives the training gauntlet, more are stepping away, often years before the official retirement age. Worn down by the relentless demands of the job. A recently retired engineer, reflecting on his last run, described a world that feels both familiar and foreign. He remembers the camaraderie of two-person crews, the comfort of knowing who would share the cab, and the pride in mastering a complex craft. But in the final years, the job changed. The trains grew longer, the schedules less forgiving, and the calls more unpredictable. He watched as colleagues left, some for health reasons, others because they simply could not bear another missed holiday or sleepless night. Their departures left holes that new hires could not fill fast enough. This is not a temporary dip. It is a demographic squeeze that recruitment drives and signing bonuses cannot solve. The shortage persists because the outflow of experience outpaces the inflow of new talent. Each retirement is not just a lost pair of hands, it is a loss of knowledge, stability, and continuity. The industry's answer, increasingly, is to look to technology, automation pilots, remote operation, and the prospect of single-person crews. But for now, the gap remains, and the trains still need engineers at the controls. The debate over automation and crew size now sits at the heart of the engineer shortage. Railroad companies point to a simple equation: fewer available workers, more trains that need to move. Their answer is technology, automation pilots, remote monitoring, and the prospect of running freight trains with a single person in the cab. In 2024, the Federal Railroad Administration set a new regulatory path, allowing railroads to seek approval for single-person crews if they can show that safety risks are managed. Two short-line railroads, Georgia Central and First Coast, have already petitioned for waivers. These are not theoretical discussions. The petitions cite crew shortages as the driving force, and both carriers say that advanced monitoring and positive train control can fill the gap left by a second crew member. Railroad executives frame the push as a necessary response to a shrinking workforce. Public statements from Class 1 carriers describe automation as a way to keep trains moving, arguing that remote diagnostics and automated braking systems can make up for fewer eyes and hands in the cab. Some industry analysts echo this view, pointing to studies that predict a 5 to 10% gain in productivity if single crew operations become standard, assuming the technology works as intended. But the unions see a different picture. The Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, along with SMARTTD, has been clear in its opposition. In public filings and congressional testimony, union representatives warn that reducing crew size increases the workload on the remaining engineer and erodes a critical layer of safety. They argue that a single person cannot safely manage a 2-mile-long train, respond to emergencies, handle mechanical failures, and maintain vigilance for hours on end. The union's core concern is that automation, in its current form, shifts risk from the railroad to the worker and to the public. Without a second set of eyes, they say, the chances of missing a signal, overlooking a hazard, or failing to respond quickly in an emergency only go up. The Federal Railroad Administration occupies the middle ground. Its 2024 final rule does not ban single-person crews, but it does require a risk assessment and ongoing safety reports for any railroad seeking to operate with fewer than 2 crew members. Regulators insist that safety cannot be sacrificed for efficiency, and every petition is subject to review. The agency's own data shows that fatigue and distraction are persistent risks, especially on long-haul routes. In recent years, incidents involving single-person operations have been scrutinized for how quickly engineers can respond to emergencies without backup. The Federal Railroad Administration's stance is cautious. Technology can help, but it cannot replace human judgment entirely. This is not just a technical argument. It is a fight over the future of the job. Engineers who have spent decades on the rails remember when every train had at least 2 people in the cab, sometimes more. The move towards single-person crews is seen by many as the final step in a long process of cutting jobs and squeezing more work out of fewer people. For those still in the role, the prospect of running a train alone is not just about safety. It is about being asked to shoulder even more responsibility with even less support. The promise of automation may appeal to the companies, but for the people inside the cab, it can feel like another way their work is being devalued. The automation debate is no longer abstract policy. It is the sharpest confrontation between the push for efficiency and the lived reality of the engineer's job. As the industry looks to technology to fill the growing labor gap, the question remains, can a machine ever fully replace the second set of eyes, the backup in a crisis, or the quiet reassurance that comes from not being alone on the rails? The answer will shape not just the future of the railroad, but the lives of those who keep it running. America's freight trains keep rolling, but fewer want the job that keeps them moving. As engineer vacancies rise, despite 6-figure offers, supply chain delays ripple outward, touching everything from groceries to fuel. It's a stark reminder, no paycheck replaces lost sleep, missed birthdays, or the right to say when you come home. Until work restores dignity and balance, the tracks will stay empty. What would you trade for your time? Share your thoughts below.